Good afternoon. Okay, so we're going to do a sutta class, and I'm doing it a bit differently from the usual one sutta or do a sutta from head to tail to front to back. I'm doing this class the way I tend to read the suttas myself, which is to research a subject as deeply as I can and see what the Buddha said about each subject that I want to know something about. And today's topic about right speech is actually tied back to what I spoke about on Friday evening, which is about relationships and how, despite us wanting happiness and security, companionship through relationships, a lot of us get hurt because of those relationships. So then the question is, why, how do people get hurt in those relationships? And by and large, I think people get hurt because of actions through the tongue, through the mouth, through speech. I don't want to diminish the dangers of domestic violence or that kind of stuff, but I don't think for the majority of people who suffer in relationships that your suffering comes from physical actions. Maybe the absence of physical action might be a contributing factor, but by and large, speech is the one big factor that causes a lot of injury. I think that's what I see. So for today, I'd like to revisit this subject of right speech in the light of relationships, especially the close ones, where we interact with the same small group of people day in, day out, day in, day out. They're the ones who probably affects our well-being and happiness the most. So when we become a Buddhist, one of the first things you do, or we do, is to take on the 3 refuges and the 5 precepts. As you know, in the 5 precepts, the first 3 are to do with actions through the body. Killing, harming. The second is stealing, and the third one is sexual misconduct. And right speech, or one element of right speech, comes only in the 4th of the 5 precepts. And right thought, right intention doesn't even appear on the 5 precepts. The 5th precept is to avoid intoxicants. And I think there's a very good reason for that, because those 3 bodily actions can cause severe and quite often hard to reverse or irreversible results. If you killed somebody or if you injured somebody badly enough, it's hard to undo that. If you had created mistrust within a marriage, it's really hard to undo those things. So the first 3 things, all the 5 precepts, primarily want to keep us out of trouble so that we can hear the rest of the Dhamma. That's how I understand it, which is why 5 precepts come right at the front. Clean up those 5 things, and chances are your life will stabilize enough, your mind will stabilize enough that you can hear the rest of the Dhamma. So, which is why you are all here now, because then your lives aren't all that troubled as it might otherwise be if the first 3 or 4 or 5 precepts weren't kept properly. So anyway, let's move on to right speech. You will know that right speech appears as the third factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. So, in the third factor of the Noble Eightfold Path, there are a few places where the Buddha went on to explain what else is right speech. So this is one place, Anguttara Nikaya 10, the Cunda Sutta. So, thus have I heard, on one occasion the Blessed One was living in Pava in the mangrove grove of Cunda, the smith's son. Cunda, the smith's son, approached the Blessed One and paid homage to him and sat down to one side. And the Blessed One said to him, now in between I've removed a lot of stories that is not related to right speech. And then it comes to this part that says, and how, Cunda, is impurity by speech fourfold? Here, oops, how do you do this? Okay. Someone speaks falsehood if he is summoned to a council, an assembly, or to the relatives' presence to his guild, guild meaning a trade association, to the court, and is questioned as a witness. So, good man, tell what you know. And then, not knowing, he says, I know. Or, knowing, he says, I don't know. Not seeing, he might say, I see. Or seeing, he might say, I do not see. Thus, he consciously speaks falsehood for his own ends, for another's ends, or for some trifling worldly ends. So, quite clear what this means. You're saying things contrary to what you understand and believe and know. Okay, I think no arguments there. Then, what else is impurity of speech? He speaks divisively. Having heard something here, he repeats it elsewhere in order to divide those people from these people. Having heard something elsewhere, he repeats it to these people here in order to divide them from those over there. Thus, he is one who divides those who are united, a creator of divisions, one who enjoys factions, rejoices in factions, delights in factions, a speaker of words that create factions. Okay. What does this mean in real life? Do we do this? What do you think? Workplaces, yes. So we might say those guys over there, they're not doing their job, they're useless, they're skiving or whatever it is, right? Indeed, just speaking in ways that does not promote cooperation, on the other hand, make the boss look down on the other guy because you yourself want to be seen as the better guy, or you want your team to be more in the prominent opinion, then we have this kind of speech. So, a lot of little conversations, like he says, on the workplace, is of this nature. When we start talking about different teams, our group versus that group, kind of this conversation. Then, next one, he says here, he speaks harshly. He utters such words that are rough, hard, hurtful to others, offensive to others, bordering on anger, unconducive to concentration. Okay, most of the time we understand what this is. Somebody who comes in bad-tempered, got up on the wrong side of the bed, and therefore unloads all his negativity on to the rest of us. So we understand that as Harsh speech. We were having a conversation. Okay, so harsh speech up to the obvious stuff, we kind of understand. This morning, was it this morning? At breakfast, between Venerable Vipassako and Lin, they were having a little conversation and they pointed out that their two families have a little habit of being contrary. As in, if I said, wow, I like a cup of coffee, and the other person might say, you shouldn't drink so many cups of coffee, it's bad for you. Then you might say, okay, I'll have a cup of tea. Tea is equally bad. All right, how about water then? I'll have some water. Oh, this water is just plain tap water, that's not good for you either. It's like you're trying to have a conversation and you get put down at every turn. Somehow you don't get it right. And those little conversations they're not harsh, they're not exactly offensive, but they discourage conversations, right? They discourage a discussion. It's like, okay, I'm not going to tell you anymore what I want to drink. Right? I just go get it myself. You don't have to know. And I think relationships are often eroded slowly like that. This habit of negating what somebody else says. A question, where does it come from? What drives it? Why does a person need to feel the urge to negate another person? Ego? Yeah, sort of. You kind of want to feel that you know better than the other guy, right? Yes, that happens too. So it's, if I can describe what I think you are thinking, it's to make sure the other person knows who's boss, make sure the other person follows your instructions, right? Sort of. And some people have, some conversations with some people are like that. You can imagine though, if you have two similar persons having that conversation, so I like to have a coffee. You shouldn't drink so much coffee. Why should you tell me whether I should drink coffee or not have coffee? Because, and then the temperature escalates very quickly, right? So this little thing, I'm not sure if the Buddha meant it in here, because initially when it's the first time it's said, the second time it's said, you don't find it hurtful, you don't find it offensive, but when it's repeated enough, you kind of feel it. You think? And then, of course, once it starts escalating, then it becomes a big burden in the mind, because you walk away from that conversation, this thing is stuck in there like a piece of chewing gum. Yes.
I do aged care work.
Yes.
Sometimes I see this with elderly couples at each other.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I also see that. And strangely, there are couples who find that.
Sometimes sweet couples.
Yeah. they sometimes find it comforting to have this person next to them to argue with. Hard to understand, right? What I do observe though, when you have that kind of speech habits, it prevents you from having a more serious and sincere conversation.
Well, sometimes what I observe with my clients is covering up some kind of pain.
Yeah.
I really want to acknowledge.
Yes. Yes. So, I suppose if you have gotten to the point 60, 70, 80 years, well, 60 is still kind of early. As I was saying to Lynn yesterday, the Western Australian statistics, congratulations to all of you, you're being in Western Australia. It turns out you're among the 2 states in Australia that has the longest life expectancy. The men folk should expect to live to 81, and the women folk to 85. And if you're a good Buddhist following the 5 precepts, come to Nola Mara often and listen to the talks, chances are you have another 5, 10, 15 years beyond that. If you don't drink, don't smoke, don't indulge in risky lifestyles. So, I don't know, if you have got clients who are close to 80 and they decide, okay, we don't want to deal with those buried pain, I understand. Have the kind of conversation you rather have and not dig into the old stuff. But for the rest of us, it would be nice if we can have sincere conversations. Even agreeing to disagree and to understand each other's conditioning, to understand how we have come to be, to understand the pains we have each gone through in our separate lives before or during the marriage. But as I was saying, this negating each other all the time, it just prevents a smooth, sincere flow of conversation. And especially so for family partners that you're going to see for many, many more years to come, or family members, children, parents. If the whole family can have a discussion about this little subject, then there's a good chance that conversation, the quality of the conversation can change. If one side wants to do it and the other side does not see the point, then of course it's a struggle. But it takes, one side can always start. Okay. The next point, the Buddha says, he indulges in idle chatter. He speaks at an improper time. He speaks falsely. He speaks what is unbeneficial and contrary to the Dhamma and discipline. Discipline here is Vinaya, so this applies to monks. He speaks at an improper time with such words that are worthless, unreasonable. Unreasonable, here actually in the Pali, it kind of says unsubstantiated or illogical, rambling and unbeneficial. Unreasonable, just to go back to what we were saying, in the example, somebody might say, I might say, I like coffee or I like tea, and then somebody might put me down for the choice of coffee and tea. And it doesn't quite have a strong basis. The point is just, I'm right, you're wrong. You've got your choice is inferior to my advice to you. Kind of. That's the intention of that behind, there's a mood of that behind. And then this other word, rambling, Bhikkhu Bodhi used this word to convey a Pali word that says apariyanta. Anta in Pali means the end. Pariyanta, I was told by Sinhalese speakers, it means the end point, the destination. And apparently you use the word to describe airports and shipping ports and things like that, right? Apariyanta, the A in front, negates it. So it means without an end point, without a destination, and you just go on talking and talking and talking. So Bhikkhu Bodhi says, rambling without a purpose and unbeneficial. And then you say, okay, do we indulge in idle chatter? Then you realize a lot of our discussion about foreign politics, especially what's happening in America, what's happening in China, what's happening in Europe, we talk about it during work time, we talk about it during meal times. We speak as if we know without knowing, so it borders on speaking falsely. I think that's what it means here, speaking without basis. I think that president is so and such and such. I think that other guy should... without basis. And in the end, it's an opinion that has got no consequence. It's worthless. And you can go on, you put 2 or 3 guys together, people can go on and until the breakfast is over, until the lunch break is over, and and then the conversation still hasn't finished. So, yes. So, those are the 4 ways, how do I do this? In which a person can indulge in idle chatter. I'll get to the next page. And in this way, purity by speech is 4-fold. And how Cunda is purity by speech? Purity by speech, 4-fold. Here, someone having abandoned false speech, abstains from false speech. If he knows, he says, I know. If he doesn't know, he says, I don't know. If he sees, he says, I see. If he doesn't see, he says, I do not see. He does not consciously speak falsehood for his own ends, for another's ends, or for some trifling worldly ends. Okay, good. Having abandoned... Actually, I should say something else here. Once in a while, we tend to want to win a conversation, a debate, by stretching the truth. And when this happens in a relationship, often it's a sign of a competition going on. And I would recommend to you, if you see a sign of this stretching the truth, competing to win an argument, to stop and see what is the underlying driver. Very often we can spot ourselves telling lies. You know, when you're about to say something false, you feel guilty for it. But when we are stretching truths, when we are saying things, pretending to know without actually knowing, coffee is bad for you shouldn't take so much coffee, we don't realize it, that we are saying things without knowing. But when you're competing for rightness, correctness, and you're not speaking in a cooperative way, there's an underlying competition that is not seen, that's not on the surface, and you're not addressing the underlying issue. You're addressing a superficial issue which actually has no consequence. Okay, having abandoned divisive speech, he abstains from divisive speech. He doesn't say what he hears here and tells it there. He doesn't hear what he heard there and tells it here in order to divide people. He is one who reunites those who are divided. He's a promoter of unity, enjoys concord, rejoices in concord, delights in concord, and speaks words of concord. And here, how do we apply this to relationships? Quite often, this divisive speech, we try to highlight the negative part of somebody else's character. Here, he says he's one who tries to reunite and promote unity. So even if somebody has bad qualities, he tries to bring that person into that group. A promoter of unity who speaks word of concord. This one is kind of rare, I think, right? This is one of the aspects of right speech that I think is not so common, and something that we can all improve on. So rather than to highlight a person's negative qualities, especially for the sake of putting that person down, you speak, even if you had to speak about the negative qualities, you speak of it in a way that reunites. Yes, the person has got a bad temper, but we should try and reunite, bring him into the group. Yes, he's got a difficult life. His bad temper is because of his difficult childhood. And because of that, he, yes, does seem to be a bit rough on the outside, but he's got a soft heart, he's got a good heart, and if we work with him, he will be a good team member. You could say words like that, and still be addressing the negative part of personality, but the intention is good, to promote unity. So think of what happens in your family and or any other relationships that you are part of. What can you do with this regard? And then the next point, having abandoned harsh speech, he abstains from harsh speech. He speaks words that are gentle, pleasing to the ear, lovable, goes to the heart, is courteous, desired by many, and agreeable by many. I will tell you that Ajahn Brahm is probably the expert in this. Every now and again when he needs to teach a piece of Dhamma, he will soften his voice, soften the mood, soften your hearts to the point where he can just put the message into your heart without any resistance. Have you seen that? Incredible, right? Compare that versus trying to drill a message into his head. Which one works better? So yes, here is an art of right speech that I think we can all learn to develop a bit more, especially since we treasure our relationships. As we were saying, we look to relationships as a source of companionship, as a source of security, as a source of happiness. And yet, quite often we practice all the impure speech and destroys those relationships, or at least not make the best use of them. And here are 4 things that the Buddha says. Develop these, and it'll help you in your relationships. In this way, that purity of speech is 4-fold. Interestingly, the Buddha then goes on to say, this little sutta, the Buddha goes quite heavy on this thing called the right speech. He says, okay, so here he's addressing bhikkhus, not lay people so much. Bhikkhus, one possessing 4 qualities, is deposited in hell as if brought there. What for? One speaks falsely, speaks divisively, speaks harshly, and indulges in idle chatter. One possessing these 4 qualities is deposited in hell as if brought there. That's rather very severe. These are not the only 4 things that the Buddha uses this explanation about being deposited in hell. There are other things about wrong actions and creating schisms and things like that. But here it does show how seriously the Buddha thought about this question of right speech and wrong speech. And he goes on to say, of course, bhikkhus possessing these 4 other qualities, one is deposited in heaven as if brought there. What for? One abstains from false speech, abstains from divisive speech, abstains from harsh speech, and from idle chatter. One possessing these 4 qualities is deposited in heaven as if brought there. That's interesting. Now, then another sutta, he says something a little bit different. Bhikkhus, possessing 5 factors, speech is well spoken, not badly spoken, is blameless, and beyond reproach, criticism by the wise. What 5? What is spoken? It is spoken at the proper time. What is said is true. It is spoken gently. What is said is beneficial. And it is spoken with a mind of loving kindness. Possessing these 5 factors, speech is well spoken, not badly spoken. It is blameless and beyond reproach by the wise. Now, we had 4 factors earlier, now we have 5, but 2 new things have turned up. Do you notice which 2? The first and the last. It is spoken at the proper time. We'll see this. Okay, in this case, what he's trying to say is there are times when we speak, we urgently need to say what is on the tip of our tongue, to blurt it out and to reprimand somebody the moment we feel our anger rising or we feel the fear rising. And quite often that's the wrong time to say what you want to say. In the midst of at the start of an argument, when the temperature is just rising, when you can see the other person is challenging your statements, And then, because that person challenges you, you quickly want to defend your stand and defend your pride, your position, and by arguing in return. And as I was saying earlier, quite often the interaction is automatic. If you feel you've been challenged, you raise the stakes, the other side will also feel he's being challenged, and he'll raise the stakes and the intensity as well. A very normal reaction, not a very wise one. And so the Buddha now says, speak at the proper time. Speak at the time when what is said can be beneficial. Don't speak at the time because of the urge to speak. You speak for the benefit of the other person. This is one concept I think most people don't pay attention to. You've noticed so far, there are a lot of what is being said here. The Buddha is saying you speak for the benefit of the other person, for the benefit of the relationship. You don't speak for the benefit of your ego or your pride. So if you need to say something, it should either benefit us or it should benefit the other person. If you need to speak in a rush, urgently, right now because I want to stamp my ground, most of the time you're speaking for number one, not for the sake of number two or the wider community. And then this last point here, spoken with a mind of loving kindness. That's another interesting one. How many of you here work in, well, I suppose everybody who has worked anywhere would have worked for a boss, worked with a team, worked with subordinates, right? Have you ever heard management speak? When a boss tells you bad news but put in a nice way, put in a politically correct way. I think we probably all have heard it before. And sometimes we may even have had to do it ourselves because you're a manager of sort, a middle-ranking manager or a top manager. And quite often, as the subordinates, you can hear the message, you know what the boss is trying to say, and you know why he needs to put it in a politically correct way, but still you can feel the mood that is underneath. And I think that also happens in families as well, in relationships. Sometimes what is being said appears to be correct, appears to be for your benefit, but the way it is spoken conveys a sense of contempt, a sense of displeasure. And it can be felt. I think we can all feel it, right? This kind of thing. You can hear the words, you can hear the speech, but you can also feel what is the mood underlying, the intention underlying. And even though the words may sound sweet, if the underlying mind is bitter, the taste of the whole conversation is still bitter. Isn't it? So here the Buddha says, speak with a mind of loving kindness. Speak for the benefit of the person who has to listen to you. Okay. Now here is a one interesting sutta. When I first heard it, I was scratching my head. So, thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was staying in Rajagaha in the bamboo grove at the squirrel sanctuary. Then the lay follower, Visākha, went to the bhikkhuni Dhammadinnā, and after paying homage to her, sat down to one side and asked her. Turns out, Visākha and this bhikkhuni Dhammadinnā were partners before, husband and wife. The wife became a bhikkhuni and became a bhikkhuni Dhammadinnā, and at this point of the story, the commentaries goes on to say she's already an arahant. The husband is somewhere behind catching up, if I remember correctly, a stream winner. So the husband comes up to the nun and asks her some pretty deep questions. Lady, how many formations are there? Formations, sankhara, in this case, is referring to what we call volitional formation, your act of will. So, as you know, if you've been attending Ajahn Brahmali's classes, there are three formations, friend Visākha: the bodily formation, the verbal formation, and the mental formation. But lady, what is the bodily formation? What is the verbal formation? And what's the mental formation? And in answering, she says, in-breath, in-breathing and out-breathing, friend Visākha, are the bodily formation. Applied thought and sustained thought are the verbal formation. Perception and feelings are the mental formation. Quite strange, right? Don't you think? Verbal formation doesn't start at the tip of your tongue. It doesn't start in your vocal cord. The will to speak starts with vichara, vitakka vichara, oh, wrong spelling, all right. Applied thought and sustained thought. Hold that for a while. Why are applied thought and sustained thought the verbal formation? First, one applies thought and sustains thought, and subsequently one breaks out into speech. That is why applied thought and sustained thought are the verbal formation. Okay. What it seems to say here is, when you want to practice right speech, before the words come out, you got to fix vitakka vichara, the thoughts in your head. If the thoughts in your head are angry, it's quite hard for the words to come out as sweet. So, which is why then the earlier sutta that we just read says, speak with a mind of metta. With your mind in metta, with your mind has got good feelings for the other person, then your vitakka vichara, your applied and sustained thoughts will be on the right track. If your mind starts off thinking, I'm not happy with this, then your speech will come out, I'm not happy with this. You are not building the relationship, you're probably tearing at it or scratching at it. Yeah? Any questions? I've spoken for a lot. I'm not sure if anybody wants to say anything. Yeah? for the benefit of the people watching online.
Just now, just the last sentence you say,
Yes.
When the mind is like is angry, okay?
Yeah.
So the speech should be angry too, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So when you're saying this, just the last bit, I was thinking of the known to me, I don't know whether it's in the sutta or not, This is during the Buddha's time, okay? The Buddha was walking past a household, household, yeah. And this person in the house told the Buddha, "Hey, you come in." So the Buddha went in. When the Buddha was out, he said, "No, you get out," Yeah. So the Buddha get out. So second time in and out. The third time, the Buddha says, "I'm not going in." And then he gave him a piece of, and walked away, The gist behind this is, Buddhists are not walkover. You have to use your discretion. If people harsh speech to you, this thing, okay, but to a certain extent, don't be like a walkover, you're a fool, this thing, you have to in a way, to say, I'm not going in again, I'm not, yeah.
That wasn't a household, that was a yakka. Yes. Yeah. I suppose I will get to that in a moment. Question about being a walkover. So here is one part of the Buddha's teaching. Being a walkover, what do you do if you're on the receiving end of bad speech? That's the question here. If you're on the receiving end of harsh speech, like this yakka trying to exercise his power over the Buddha, what do you do? And a lot of people suffer that too. The so-called the lesser partner or the subordinate partner within a relationship, the one with less power. Quite often wonder, what do you do? Do I hang around? Do I get out? Or do I... And you need to, or you want to defend yourself. So, very timely question. Let me show you what the Buddha said in this particular sutta. Simile of the saw. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living in Savatthi at Jeta's Grove Ananda Pindika's park. Bhikkhus, here are 5 ways of speech that others may use when they address you. When they address you, they may speak. Their speech may be timely or untimely. Their speech may be true or untrue. Their speech may be gentle or harsh. It may be connected with good or with harm. And that speech may be spoken with a mind of loving kindness or with inner hate. Herein, bhikkhus, you should train thus. Our minds will remain unaffected. We shall utter no evil words. We shall abide compassionate for their welfare, with a mind of loving kindness, without inner hate. And then it goes on. We shall pervade that person with a mind imbued with loving kindness. Starting with him, we shall abide pervading the all-encompassing world with a mind imbued with loving kindness. Abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility, without ill will. This is how you should train bhikkhus. So, what I didn't copy down was, towards the end of this, later down this sutta, the Buddha goes on to describe, even if bandits came to you, pulled out your hand and start cutting it with a saw, pulled out the other hand and start cutting it with a saw, even so, pervade that person and then the whole world with loving kindness. If you can't do that, the Buddha said, you're not following my instructions. That's a very, very high standard. Just as the rest of this right speech, it starts pushing the standards really, really high. But you can also understand what the Buddha is trying to do here. Now, if it wasn't a saw cutting your hand, it was just a spouse telling you, you're bloody useless. It's a much lesser attack. If there you have trouble trying to maintain your loving kindness and your compassion, then what hope when we encounter even worse torture? But what the Buddha is also trying to say is, start from the simpler tests. When you hear something unpleasant, harsh, untimely, connected with inner hate, if that is how somebody in your family speaks to you, the Buddha says, our minds will remain unaffected. We shall utter no evil words. We shall abide compassionate for their welfare with a mind of loving kindness. And you can understand, if it was a relationship we think is important, you'd be motivated to want to try and do this. Yes.
So what do you think now with this sutta, this thing, even if you sever your limbs, everything, you are not supposed to be fighting back, okay? On the other hand, just now what I spoke about, we are not a walkover. There are contradictions now. So
Okay.
what's your view?
Here's my view. We don't have to look at it as contradictions. Remember what I said on Friday night? Quite often we get trapped into option A, option B. Option A, we got to fight back. Option B, we have loving kindness. Question: can you have loving kindness and protect yourself at the same time?
Ajahn Brahm said the love of tigers live at a distance.
Yes.
Sometimes.
Yes. So, if we don't take an extreme example of bandits sawing off your hand, but take the more common example of a heated discussion at home. So, one person wants to do something, the other person don't want to do something. One person says, we should take a holiday to Spain this year. The other person said, no, we shouldn't. We should save our money for the children's education. Say, is one side the walkover or the other side the walkover, or is it that you can actually sit down and talk about it and agree on something? If the idea is, I want what I want, I don't care what you want, and the other side says, you're taking my money to go to Spain and you're not caring for our children, the discussion has turned unkind, unbeneficial on both sides. So which is why I'm saying, if both partners would understand these teachings, you have common ground to sit down. Okay, let's not fight over this. Let's work this out and have a cooperative conversation rather than a combative conversation. Be sensitive to this last bit. Recognize what a combative conversation is. When you hear something and you disagree and you push back, versus you hear something, you disagree, and you explore. the exploration, inviting the other person to put his or her case down, and then you put your case down, and then look for where you can satisfy as much of each other's needs as possible without saying, I'm not going to be a pushover, I'm not going to back down on my demand. Then the conversation stops. That's I think where the Buddha was going with a lot of these teachings. You don't really want to be selfish. What do you think? Yes?
It's okay, I'm sorry, I keep talking.
No. You're raising some good points.
This is only a part of the Buddha's teaching, you know. The most important, the bigger thing is the mind, the feeling, you know, all this is only a small little thing. Okay, now.
Yes.
So what I mean is, that's how I was saying, we are not the Buddha, you know, in that, the story, we're not a walkover, okay, yeah. So what I mean is, I've heard, you know, this, like if you were to, if they were to saw your limbs, if you were to fight back this thing, then you are not following my teaching. Yeah, I read that, you know. And then I read the other, the one, you know, if you don't, you know, I mean, not a walkover. So I use my own way to judge things, you know. Okay, you know, okay? Depending on the situation, you know. Use your own discretion, you know. There are people who speak harshly to you. You could think they might be, sometimes they're jealous of you, you know, just ignore and walk away, you know. You know? You can do that. But for some people, you cannot. You know? Like for me, you can't just annoying people and all that thing, you know. So I had to do it. Straight away, well, in front of the two other people too, you know. Say, so I just, you don't talk to me like that again, you know. You know, no. Don't you ever do that, you know. I wrote the thing. You understand this thing? No? You have to do that. And after that, because this is like a anger in me, greed, hatred, delusion, they're all, I don't want the poison in me, you know, to make me sick, you know. I quickly, think of it, I rub away the anger, this thing. So when I see the person again, I talk to the person again, like in the group, you know, I include in again this thing. But on that occasion, you have to act, you know. Sorry. You see what I mean?
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
I don't know, I must admit, I also have those tendencies and I've done things like that. And sometimes I go back and I wonder, what would have happened if I had told the person, I'd rather you don't speak to me like that, rather than, don't ever speak to me like that again. If you said it in I'd rather you don't speak to me like that because it's quite unpleasant, would that have worked?
It is like I said, you see, because the person has done it 3 or 4 times before.
Yeah.
And with other people too.
Yeah. So, interestingly, the Buddha didn't use harsh words. Well, yeah. But he does implement some very effective solutions, quite similar to what you're saying. You have heard of the Brahmadatta treatment, where the Buddha says, okay, nobody speaks to that monk again until he fixes his behavior. And suddenly that monk gets, where do I get my lunch? Oh, nobody knows, nobody tells him anything. Excluded from the community. There are times when the Buddha was trying to admonish a group of monks. These monks were fighting and arguing. He goes up to the monks and says, stop arguing and fighting. It is no good for you, no good for your practice, no good for the perception of the lay people. Stop. What did the monks tell the Buddha? Boss, you go back and meditate. This one we resolve ourselves. The Buddha says it 3 times, the monk says it 3 times. What does the Buddha do? The Buddha walks away from this whole circus, walks into the jungle and spends his vasa there with an elephant and a monkey. So, in the end, who fixed the problem and how did the problem get fixed? The lay people decided not to to feed these monks who are behaving badly. So similarly, a lot of times, if you have bad speech, like this, perhaps this incident that you're talking about, karma will take care of it. Enough people will avoid this person. This person will feel ostracized. Eventually, either he gets more bitter and secludes himself, or hopefully, cross your fingers, he hears a bit of the Dhamma and then learns right speech. But if for our own benefit, it says, harsh speech. Number 5. No, number 6. Oops, not number 6, number... number 6 here. Harsh speech, which are rough, hard, hurtful, offensive, bordering on anger, is unconducive to concentration. Here, the actual word is samadhi. If you had to say those words to this person, chances are your next 2 days you can't meditate. And it happened to me when I had to defend myself in my anagarika year. I had to do it 2-3 times a week, and because I had to do it 2-3 times a week, much of the year I couldn't meditate. So yes. It's past 4. Yes? Yes? Your turn. I suppose that's all I need to speak on. I have other stuff packed at the back just in case, but you don't have to go there. Oh, okay, we should do this one. On one occasion, a certain bhikkhu was dwelling among the Kosalans in a certain woodland thicket. On that occasion, when the bhikkhu had gone for the day's abiding, he kept thinking evil, unwholesome thoughts. That is, thoughts of sensuality, ill will, and harming. Then a devata that inhabited that wood thicket, having compassion for the bhikkhu, notice the mind of metta, desiring his good, desiring to stir up a sense of urgency. So it's for the benefit of the bhikkhu that he does this speech. Approached him and addressed him in verses. Attending carelessly, you are eaten or devoured by thoughts. Having relinquished the careless way, you should reflect carefully. Those words in the brackets is actually a translation of kajasi. Looking up in the dictionary, it says, yes, it's eaten, past tense of eat. It can also mean irritated, itchy, or it can mean devoured. So, just like what you were saying, if you had to think about, if you have encountered harsh speech and you have to reply with harsh speech, then chances are for the next 2 days, you'll be devoured by your thoughts. You can't stop them. You quickly got it off. Good for you. Exactly. Which is what this devata was saying. This deva was saying, relinquish a careless way. You should reflect carefully with thoughts on the teacher, the Dhamma, and teacher here is the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha, and your own virtues. You will surely attain to gladness, and with that, rapture and happiness as well. Yes, very wise. Okay, questions on the net? Yes, comment.
Thank you. So, any reason why it's only the harsh speech, it says it's not conducive for samadhi, while all the other wrong speech also could, for example, idle chatter or even lying might affect your meditation? Would it be?
True. Harsh speech has the additional burden of a very strong emotion, and I think that one is the one that sticks around a lot. Lying, if you are lying in a situation that has also loaded with a lot of emotion, obviously those emotions will also stick around a long time. Quite often we are not aware. We don't pay too much attention to our lying, so we don't think too much of it in terms of emotional burden. Just like Eddie says, you don't think it as a fast-acting poison. It's a very slow-acting poison that will eventually get you, but not in the next hour or 2 hours. Okay, I'll take one. Yes.
Venerable, you know the person
Yes.
who gives up that harsh speech, you know.
Yes.
So the harsh speech means there's anger in the person, you know.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So this anger, the person is mentally sick, you know. You have to look at. No, just give me. A normal person won't speak that way, say, to people. They will speak in a nice, you know. Even though I disagree with, oh, could you please, like don't do this. People understand, you know. But the speech they give out is harsh, you know. They are also considered they are mentally not well.
Yes, indeed. The Buddha calls himself a doctor because he thinks all of us are unwell. And of course, some of us are more serious. Some of us, hopefully, are not so serious. Also, sometimes, often, in fact, all the time, people who speaks harshly, they haven't heard the Buddha tell these teachings, haven't heard these teachings from the Buddha, and therefore they use whatever method that they know. So if all their lives, their only way of getting things in life is through aggression, then that's the only tool they know. It's like what they say, if a handyman only has a hammer in his toolbox, he will whack everything. If a person has a hammer, a drill, a screwdriver, a bit of super glue, he will have a lot more things to use to fix the same problem. Yeah, unfortunately, many of us, our peers, grew up in households that use only hammer.
Yeah.
So when they come, I suppose it's up to us whether or not we have the time and patience to show them super glue, to show them sticky tape, to show them blue tack. Yeah. Yes, I do understand.
It's very rare that this happens. Very rare. You know.
Of
Most
course,
people are
of course,
nice.
yes.
You know, they put out the hand, hello, all this. You know.
Unfortunately, many people have become very used to using the hammer. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll take a question from the online, from Gloria Wong. What is the Buddha's view on concealing information? Not particularly lying, but just not mentioning certain information to someone. I think the guidelines are pretty much in here. Whether or not it's connected with good and harm, benefit or not, whether it's connected with misleading a person out of ulterior motive. False speech, or for the sake of one own's end, for the another's end, or for some trifling worldly end. So if you're, concealing information or not mentioning information because of an ill will, okay, I'm not going to tell him the plane is delayed, just let him wait at the airport, I don't care. Of course, then that's a bit of ill will in that, not mentioning certain information. But on the other hand, if you find that that piece of information is not the time to pass it on, or is of little benefit, not the proper time to speak, is not beneficial, not useful, then of course concealing it is right speech, in the sense that you're not involved with idle chatter, you're not just blurting out stuff that is useless, worthless. So there is, as you understand, karma is intention. Why you say something, why you don't say something, that I think is the final judge of whether what is behind the Buddha's view. Okay, from Germany, dear Ajahn Brahm says that it's better to make peace than to be right. How do you make peace if you know you're right and angry? How do you approach that contradiction? This is a common one. Quite similar to what Eddie also brought up. If you believe you're right, the test then is here. I'm sorry. Speak at the proper time, speak what is true, speak it gently, put it in a way that is beneficial for both parties, and speak with a mind of loving kindness. So I noticed you put in there, how do you make peace when you know you're right and angry? If you are angry, you can't make peace. That's the contradiction right there. Try, especially if, again, this contradiction occurs in a conversation with a near and dear one. Because quite often you insist on being right because of an anger underneath. The anger underneath is the one that's driving the need to speak, to stamp that I am right. I've mentioned it somewhere else before, that somebody who did a lot of work about his own anger, he explained this to me. He says on the outside, it all looks like anger, it looks like aggression, but on the inside, the person who is exhibiting aggression is not angry. His adrenaline is flowing, he's in a panic, anxiety, fearful state. Quite often it's like, this person, I'm being disrespected, I'm being abandoned, I need to stand my ground, and that fear and anxiety is what drives what looks like aggression on the outside. So, if both partners are like that, of course, then you'll have a very exciting partnership with lots of drama. And so the trick to learn is, okay, dig deeper, look at what the underlying fears are, what the underlying intentions are, What is it that's causing all the discomfort, this angriness? Quite often it's not the question about what you're right or wrong about. There's something else underneath that's irritating you, eating at you. You're being devoured by your thoughts. You're paying attention to the wrong thing. The thing that divides rather than the thing that unites. I hope that answers. Okay, any last questions? Yes?
So the response for for a situation like that you've been yelled at, basically. Like, very interesting when you said that in the sutta he says to look at the situation in loving kindness, and you also said about how Ajahn Brahm teaches.
Yes.
When he wants to teach something, he say it very gently.
Yes.
So, I've seen in another sutta also that Lord Buddha, just like here, it says when somebody is very talking very harshly, you speak gently, so that itself diffuses the situation quite a lot.
Yes.
But if you try to beat that person's voice or the tempo, that goes beyond. Yeah, but it's hard to catch at that in the beginning. But that's the way, isn't it? How to do it.
Somebody introduced me to a management book called Crucial Conversations, and I read it. And the researchers went into different organizations to see who are the best managers who can actually lead a team. And of course, they discovered that conversation is the main tool to lead a team. And then they say, okay, what is it that these best managers have that they can conduct those conversations so effectively? Says rule number 1, before you talk about anything serious, you have to make sure that both parties, all parties, feel safe. If I'm going to have a conversation about me firing you, that person doesn't feel safe. No way you're going to have a decent conversation. If we enter a conversation knowing you didn't meet your target last year and we are going to do something, if that is the starting point of the conversation, you don't feel safe. Very hard to have a discussion. Likewise, if you're in a family situation and the child comes, shows you the report card and there are a few red marks in there, and your first reaction is, how? Why, you stupid child? You can't have a conversation again. So, if you're going to have a conversation, always establish safety on both sides first. The other person must come to you knowing that you have a mind of loving kindness. You have to exhibit that, put that on the table first. I am here to help you. We are having this conversation to solve this problem, to help you and help me. We are not here to say, I'm right, you're wrong. I'm here to tell you what to do.
and that will help to uncover the truth about the situation as well.
Truth, yes. Which is why then we were talking about these old couples who keep contradicting each other all the time. They just don't want to go deep into the actual subject. And if you're happy that way, fine. But for most of our relationships, I wish you can do better. Yes. Okay. Shall we finish? Okay. Thank you all for coming. We'll pay respects to the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami